Subscribe to our YouTube channel for in-depth interviews of India Inc. and press the bell icon so that you do not miss our updates.
Hello and welcome to Nirmal, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Hiral Dadia. We have with us Sanjay Ladiwala, ex-chairman, Cement Stockist and Dealers Association of Bombay and cement expert joining in. Welcome to the show, Sanjay, and it's a pleasure to speak to you as well after a really long time. Hope you're staying safe and your family, colleagues, everyone around is safe in these unprecedented times.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, luckily we are confined to our homes and we are quite safe. Thank you.
Pleasure. Sanjay, let's start with what happened. Overall, in the last 2 years, say 2018, 2019, were already slow overall for the economy. There was nothing major happening. Not the boom that we saw at the end of 2017 is something which did not really continue. And with that slowdown, you had COVID, which actually hit us. Now, with COVID, from March to now, infrastructure as a sector has been one of the worst affected sectors as well on the back of the labor shortage, etc. How would you actually, describe the transition from the last week of March to now?
Well, let me tell you, for the cement industry, uh, COVID could not have come at a worse time. It was the worst possible because, as we all know, cement is a cyclical business. And every year in the monsoons, the demand goes down. So once there was a lockdown mid-March and it continued till May, there was virtually no business. I mean, production had to be halted, inventories were piled up, and there was no sale. There was nothing, no activity virtually. Add to that the fact that the labor had started migrating. Uh, we saw a little ray of hope in or around June because once the lockdown was open, that little pent up demand for urgent works did come up. And we thought, okay, maybe there is a turning around, but it was not to be. Come July, monsoon started, and sure enough, the demand, whatever we expected, did not happen. Until September, mid September, end September, it was virtually a washout. So we have seen really no growth, no demand, nothing actually happening from March to September, barring that little spurt in July where little demand picked up. You're right, infrastructure was badly hit, and one of the main reasons was migration of labor who
Labor.
were afraid to come back. So even though material was available, money was available, projects were allowed to be started, there was nobody to execute the projects. So they did start by September, but at a very, very, very slow pace. So this is what has happened during the March to September period.
Right. So, Sanjay, with this, when we've done our channel checks right now as well, the indication that is coming in is that demand and prices have started to pick up from the month of November onwards. And this is mainly on the back of the economic activity that has regained momentum. Are you also witnessing a similar trend? And do you think this is something which is going to be sustainable over the next couple of months?
Well, yes. Uh, Actually, cement demand started picking up in October itself. It was mainly because uh, the people had started migrating back. So the infra projects had started picking up. But most surprisingly, what was really driving the demand from September onwards was the rural and what we call the individual housing demand. Somehow, the liquidity was available in rural areas, labor was already migrated there, and construction activity picked up in the rural areas before it picked up in the urban areas. So, tier one and two cities really did not see much of a demand pickup. It was first the rural areas. Add to that the fact that affordable housing had started. So, pickup first was rural, followed by affordable housing. And then, as the labor started migrating, to the projects, then it was the infrastructure which actually picked up and picked up gradually, but the pickup was there, evident in October. Sure, November was much better.
Right. So, Sanjay, right now, if you go to see, do you think this demand is something which is going to be sustainable? Because what's happening is across in a lot of regions, we are witnessing untimely rains. That's number one over the last couple of days. With this, we are not very far away from monsoon as well. So, taking this into consideration, how are you expecting the demand growth to continue from here to the for the next 8 to 12 months?
Okay, I'll start with the answer first, and that I expect the demand to be good. I'll explain why. Uh, Infrastructure is, a sector where the demand does not switch on and off.
Hmm.
Can go down when the execution of the works comes down, and that is mainly because of climatic conditions. Like in the north, for example, when it's very cold, the pace of work does slow down a bit because people can't work so much in the cold. Just an example.
Hmm.
So it does. In the monsoons, we know that the works come down, but the inherent demand, which has been set in motion, is always there. So I'm not even talking about the next 2 months, where I think definitely the demand will be sustainable. There's a lot of pent up demand. The rural story is good and it's going on. There is no way. I mean, I know we are facing some unseasonal rains, but that's not likely to upset the apple cart. It's really going to go forward. And monsoon, yes, we will see it coming down a bit. There's no question about it. But infrastructure works cannot be stopped. Like I said, unless there is some severe calamity or flooding and there are floods, that's a different thing. We've also seen droughts affecting them. When there is no water supply, so works have to be stopped because there is no water for human consumption. So, barring those unforeseen or unfortunate events, infrastructure demand is set in and is good. There's a lot of liquidity in the hands of the people in the agri sector
Hmm.
and the rural areas. So I'm expecting that the rural demand will also be good. The only question mark, and a very big question mark, is the demand generated by private housing in urban areas, the tier one and tier two cities.
Hmm.
That does not look hopeful because there is so much inventory and there is a liquidity crisis there. So that is anybody's guess when that will add to it.
Right. So, is it right to say that the urban demand is something which is going to be slightly slow? However, and do you think rural demand will be able to offset the deficit in terms of urban demand?
Uh, Not so much because as it is, the rural demand is pretty large. We're talking about nearly about 45 to 48% of total consumption is in the rural segment. Uh, the slack will be taken up slightly, but it is mainly the infra growth which will make up for the lack of demand in the urban sector, not so much in the rural.
Right. And overall, what has been the impact in terms of where pricing goes?
Well, pricing was virtually, I mean, in the first months of the lockdown, we have seen pricing. Anybody had their price because there was no sale, so it was meaningless. Volume was zero, so no matter what you quoted into zero was nothing. But uh, post October, we have seen slight uptick in the prices. This prices, of course, is because of that pent up demand, like I said, and of course, based on a little bit of hope that the prices will hold steady. Luckily for the industry, the prices are not only holding steady, but going up slightly. And I dare say that the next quarter, Jan to March, should be good, both volume wise and price wise for them.
Right. And overall, were there, cost-cutting initiatives that the industry had taken, which actually helped companies maintain their margins, though the volumes were low?
Absolutely. They had resorted to a lot of cost cutting measures, some which may not have been palatable. and some which were, some people got hurt because of those also. Obviously, logistics costs had to be brought down. I mean, there are some costs which are like fixed costs and overheads which could not be helped. There are smaller companies who have, I mean, even gone so far as to reduce salaries, you
Mm,
know. But there are some fixed costs which could not be helped. Having said that, they have taken some measures for cost cutting, which did help to maintain the cost because as long there was no volume of sales, so they had nothing else but to do that to survive. So they have done that.
right. And overall, how long do you think we will take to get back to, say, pre-March 2020, levels in terms of volumes?
Uh, if you say on a monthly basis, I would say we should be reaching those levels in the second quarter. That means I'm talking about the first quarter FY22. Month on month, we should be able to easily compare with, say, April 19,
Mm,
you know. So we should be back on track. But if you take it annually, this year, FY21 has been pretty bad. So, overall, there will be a degrowth of, I would hazard a guess, and I'm saying hazard a guess because all figures are not yet available to
right.
us, of anywhere between 12 to 15%. So, to make up that and to bring it back on level,
Mm.
I think it will be a couple of quarters more.
Right. And if you have to look at demand from different regions, in the from October to now, wherever you've seen a good recovery, which are the regions which are showing good recovery and which are the ones which are still lagging behind?
Well, the northern and eastern regions, especially when we include northeast in the
Mm,
east also, have been phenomenal. I mean, there's a lot of construction activity, mainly in infrastructure, going on. So we are seeing from J&K, Bengal, Bihar, UP, all these areas really moving forward. So the number one is that region, east and the north, uh, followed by the central demand. Central region is also doing pretty well. Uh, West is, I would say, lagging behind, mainly because infra projects are picking up, but not. There aren't so many new ones coming on stream, and they're a little slow.
mm, mm,
South region is the problem. South, the ratio is pretty skewed between demand and supply,
mm.
and not many projects, except the privately funded ones only. Not many projects are coming up there. So I think South may be a cause for concern going forward.
Right. And with this demand going ahead, if do you think there could be a price hike on the annual, and if yes, what is the range that you're expecting?
Well, it will be difficult to guess what would be the price rise.
Mm,
As if you say now, the price rises have been pretty nominal. If you take an average all India price, they've gone up by about, say, anywhere between 5 to 10%.
10%, correct.
Right? So that is pretty nominal, considering also the fact that they have made losses for
Mm,
whatever 6 months or so. Uh, it would be difficult to quantify what would be the price rise, but sure, prices should rise because demand is rising,
mm, mm.
and therefore I think that should not be. See, cement prices are not cost related; they are
Correct.
basically driven by demand. So, irrespective of whether cost goes up or goes down, you know, some people ask for justification as to if you reduce cost, why should you increase your price? But they are there in there to make money. So
Correct.
when
And your supply chain is something which has got expensive as well right now.
uh, uh, what do you exactly mean by supply chain?
Supply chain in the sense in terms of your distribution costs, your logistic costs.
Yeah, I would agree. The logistics cost has gone up. As you know, fuel prices have gone through the
Right.
sky, and logistics costs are a cause for worry. Distribution costs have been steady. They have not been brought down, nor have they increased as compared to last year or the year before that also. So those are pretty steady. But yes, logistics costs have gone up, and I don't know whether they will be able to control those. But hopefully they might be able to find alter. What happens is when logistics costs go up,
Mm,
the reach of the market. A manufacturer, suppose, is able to take his material to say 300 kilometers because that's the logistics cost he can afford. If the cost goes up, then he'll go to 250 kilometers or 200. So the market reach of the manufacturer comes down. Therefore, also reducing competition in various regions because the reach is down, and therefore leading to a price rise also. Okay,
Mm,
because the competition is down. And price rise means they can afford a larger logistical cost. So
cost.
this is the cycle that goes on.
Right. And very lastly, Sanjay, overall from here on, what's happened is due to the pandemic, a lot of sectors that are going, a lot of change in, say, sales strategy, a transformation in the way of doing business. Do you think the cement sector is something which will also need to rapidly adopt to the changes from a digital marketing perspective, remote working practices, or contactless transactions, contactless, or probably I don't know how. I mean, the deliveries would have been made, but anything of that sort. Do you think there's a transformation that would be required and that's already in process?
Uh, well, some time back, even prior to COVID coming on the
Mm,
scene, uh, the cement industry had migrated towards digital, working, and most of the things, as far as the two major sectors are concerned, which is called non-trade and key, which is infrastructure, were everything was online. It was only the retail segment which was not. And it'll be difficult because at the retailer level, where you need to sell 10 bags and 20 bags, at that level, to avoid contact or to change that may be difficult. So I don't know whether they will be able to do it or are thinking of doing some things. But as yet, that hasn't changed. And cement is a commodity after all. So it does need to be delivered. It's not some digital service which
correct.
can be given. So that end point, the last mile, may be difficult to change.
Mm-hmm.
Barring that, yes, uh, it's already online. Uh, People like me are working from home. A lot of my staff are also working from home, and we can afford to do that because everything is now available online.
Right. And Sanjay, lastly, with for cement as a sector, it's always been production capacity and demand. These have been major deterrents of with regards to where success of a brand or a company goes. But from here on, do you think strategic foresight, marketing savvy are the ones who will actually win the day? Because it will be time for the cement industry to break out of its concrete cocoon there.
Well, there are some companies who are quite forward-looking,
Mm,
and they have adopted uh, very intelligent, I would say, marketing strategies.
mm,
Uh, and that those were in place irrespective of COVID, much
correct.
before. And they have been gradually building up their brand. Some new companies too.
Mm,
Some older companies are still, laggards and have not changed their mindset
mm.
as far as brand building is concerned. They still are in that old form of mind and are not. So yes, you are right. There are some companies who are progressing towards that, building up their brands. In fact, if you see, there's a lot of consolidation happening in this industry, and I mean, once that happens, of course, as of now there are 50 odd companies, so it's a little difficult. And India is a very big country, so like we have in Europe and other places, to have only 5 or 6 players is going to be virtually impossible.
Mm,
At least not in my time will I see that. But uh, there is consolidation happening, and that brings about some kind of steadiness in the methods by which the business is done. The smaller companies will try to emulate those bigger ones who have a vision, who move forward, adopting newer marketing strategies. So this consolidation is good for the entire industry, not only those big ones who gather brute force by consolidation.
Absolutely, and I think that's going to be the way forward as well. Thank you, Sanjay, so much for joining us on the show. Pleasure to speak to you. Great insights and a great discussion that we've had as well. I hope you enjoyed the conversation too.
I did. I did. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to do so.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Sanjay, and see you soon again. And stay safe.
Thank you. You too. You